The call came in at 4:47 a.m., 13 minutes before Marcus Ward's shift was supposed to end. Not a phone call. A building alarm, soft and rhythmic, triggered by a motion sensor on the 7th floor of Hargrove and Linden Engineering, where no one should have been working at that hour. Marcus pushed away from the security desk in the ground floor lobby, left his thermos of lukewarm coffee beside the sign-in ledger, and picked up his flashlight out of habit, even though every hallway light in the building ran on automatic timers. He had worked overnight security at the firm for just over 2 years, long enough to know the sound of every elevator settling, every heating duct expanding in winter, every automatic lock cycling at midnight. The building talked constantly if you knew how to listen. Most nights it had nothing important to say. He took the service elevator because the main one was slow before 6, and as the doors opened onto the 7th floor, the smell hit him first. Fresh coffee. Someone had brewed a pot in the executive kitchen recently enough that the scent still hung warm in the corridor. Marcus moved quietly past the darkened offices of project managers and senior engineers toward the glow, leaking from beneath the door of the large conference room at the end of the hall. Through the glass partition, he could see papers spread across the table, 2 laptops open, and a desk lamp pulled to the edge, throwing a circle of hard white light over blueprints that covered nearly the entire surface. No one was inside now. Whoever had been working had stepped out, maybe to the restroom, maybe to another floor. Marcus should have noted the alarm, confirmed no break-in, and returned downstairs. That was the job. Observe, report, do not touch. But one of the blueprints had slid partway off the table, hanging at an angle that made the cross-section drawing visible even from the doorway. A bridge. Massive multi-span, the kind of project Hargrove and Linden had built its reputation on for 40 years. Marcus recognized the general layout because the firm had been buzzing about it for months. The Ridley Creek Bridge, a $240 million state infrastructure contract, the largest single project in the company's history. Final approval was scheduled for tomorrow's board presentation. He should have walked away. A security guard had no business reading engineering documents any more than a janitor had business reading financial reports. But Marcus Ward had not always been a security guard, and the eyes that scanned that drawing carried instincts built long before he ever wore a uniform with someone else's name on the badge. One number in the steel reinforcement schedule stopped him cold. A rebar specification for the primary load-bearing pylons. Grade 60, where every bone in his body said grade 75 should be. Not for aesthetic reasons, not for preference, for physics. For the tensile strength required to hold that span under dynamic wind load in a river valley where gusts regularly exceeded 80 miles per hour during storm season. Marcus stared at it longer than he should have, then heard footsteps returning down the corridor. He stepped back from the doorway just as Victor Linden, the firm's co-founder and chief structural engineer, rounded the corner carrying a fresh mug and a phone pressed between his shoulder and ear. Victor stopped when he saw Marcus. His expression shifted from surprise to mild irritation, the look powerful men reserve for people whose presence they hadn't planned for. "Alarm triggered on this floor," Marcus said. "Just checking." Victor nodded once, dismissive. "Working late. You can reset it." "Yes, sir." Marcus turned and walked back toward the elevator. His shift ended 11 minutes later. He clocked out, changed from his uniform shirt into a plain gray hoodie in the basement locker room, and drove his 12-year-old Honda Civic through empty morning streets to pick up his son before the before-school program opened at Greenfield Elementary. Caleb Ward was 7 years old, small for his age, with his mother's dark brown eyes and a habit of reading cereal boxes out loud at breakfast because he liked practicing words with more than 3 syllables. He was sitting on the front steps of Mrs. Delaney's house 2 blocks from the school, backpack already on when Marcus pulled up. "You're early," Caleb said, climbing into the back seat. "Slow night. Did anything happen?" "Nope. Just quiet building stuff." Caleb accepted this because at 7 a quiet building sounded boring enough to be true. He pulled a library book from his bag and started reading before Marcus had even turned the corner. Marcus watched him in the rearview mirror and thought about the number on the blueprint. Grade 60. He could almost feel it sitting in his chest like a stone he had swallowed accidentally. He dropped Caleb at school, drove home to their 1-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner on Prospect Avenue, and tried to sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, the cross-section appeared behind his eyelids, clean and precise, with that one specification glowing like a wrong note in a melody only he could hear. By noon, he had given up on rest. He sat at the small kitchen table where Caleb did homework every night and opened his laptop, a refurbished ThinkPad he had bought for $120 because the screen had a dead pixel cluster in the upper left corner. He searched for publicly available information about the Ridley Creek Bridge project. Environmental impact statements, traffic projections, geological surveys of the river valley, all filed with the State Transportation Department. None of them included detailed structural specifications because those were proprietary, locked inside Hargrove and Linden's servers. But the geological survey told him what he already suspected. The Ridley Creek Valley sat in a wind corridor between two ridgelines, a natural funnel that accelerated storm gusts far beyond what flat terrain models predicted. Grade 60 rebar would hold under normal conditions. It would hold under moderate stress. But under sustained high wind events combined with heavy vehicle loading during peak traffic, the margin of safety on those pylons would drop below anything Marcus had ever seen approved in his life. Not immediate failure. Something worse. Gradual fatigue. Microfractures developing over years, invisible until the day they weren't. The kind of failure that killed people on a Tuesday morning when no one was expecting anything except traffic. Marcus closed the laptop and stared at the wall where a framed photo of Caleb's kindergarten graduation hung next to a smaller, older photo of a woman with the same dark eyes. Elaine, 4 years gone. Ovarian cancer that moved so fast the diagnosis and the funeral felt like they happened in the same season. He picked up his phone, put it down, picked it up again. He had no one to call about this. No credentials anyone would respect. No title that would make an engineer listen to a man who checked locks for a living. The last time Marcus Ward had any professional connection to structural engineering was 5.5 years ago, when he was 28 months into a master's program at Virginia Tech with a 3.94 GPA and a research assistantship that his advisor said would lead to a PhD track. Then Elaine got sick. The insurance covered some of it. The rest arrived as bills with numbers that made his vision blur. He took a semester off. Then another. Then the loan started defaulting because he couldn't work full-time, attend to a dying wife, and study finite element analysis simultaneously. After the funeral, he sold the car they had bought together, moved to a cheaper apartment, and took the first job that offered a schedule compatible with raising a child alone. Night security paid $19.50 an hour and let him be home before Caleb woke up. It wasn't a career, it was architecture for survival. Now he was sitting in a kitchen that smelled like dish soap and leftover rice. Certain that a $240 million bridge was going to be built with the wrong steel, and completely unsure whether saying anything would accomplish anything other than getting him fired from the only job that let him keep his son fed and in school. He went back to work that night carrying the knowledge like something heavy strapped to his ribs. The building was normal. Quiet hallways, humming servers, the distant sound of the parking garage gate opening and closing as late workers left. Marcus made his rounds, checked every floor, and when he reached the 7th, the conference room was dark. The blueprints were gone. But the recycling bin outside the executive kitchen had not been emptied yet. Inside it, beneath coffee filters and a takeout container, Marcus found 3 printed pages that had been crumpled and discarded, preliminary load calculation worksheets. Handwritten notes in the margin, Victor Linden's handwriting, which Marcus recognized from dozens of signed memos pinned to the staff bulletin board downstairs. One note read, "Revise per Kessler guidance. Acceptable tolerance." Kessler Marcus didn't recognize the name. He photographed the pages with his phone, smoothed them back into the recycling bin, and returned to his desk downstairs, feeling like a man standing at the edge of something he did not fully understand yet. The next morning, after dropping Caleb at school, he searched for Kessler. He found it quickly. Kessler and Pratt, a materials supply company based in Delaware. They had won the steel fabrication subcontract for the Ridley Creek project 6 months earlier. The award had been mentioned in a regional construction trade publication, a small article noting that Kessler and Pratt had underbid 2 larger competitors by 14% on structural steel. Marcus leaned back in his kitchen chair. He knew what 14% meant. You don't cut structural steel costs by 14% through efficiency. You cut them by downgrading material specifications and hoping no one checks the math before concrete gets poured. He went to work that night with his phone in his breast pocket and a feeling in his stomach that had shifted from unease to something closer to dread. At 11:30 p.m., while the building was completely empty, he accessed the 7th floor conference room again. This time, the blueprints were locked in a cabinet. But Victor's office, 2 doors down, was not locked because the cleaning crew needed access for trash and vacuuming, and the security system tracked entry by badge. Marcus's badge opened every door in the building. That was the job. He did not touch the computer. He did not open drawers. He looked at exactly one thing, a framed photo on the credenza behind Victor's desk. Victor Linden shaking hands with a man at what appeared to be a golf tournament. The caption on the small brass plate beneath it read, "Hargrove and Linden Annual Charity Classic. Victor Linden and Dale Kessler. Dale Kessler, owner of Kessler and Pratt." Marcus left the office, returned to the lobby, and sat behind his security desk for the remaining 5 hours of his shift, thinking about the weight of bridges and the weight of silence, and which one was more dangerous. The board presentation happened the following afternoon at Tulu. Marcus was not there because his shift started at 10 p.m. But the building's atmosphere when he arrived that night told him everything. Lights still burning on the 7th floor. Cars still in the executive parking section. The kind of quiet energy that follows either celebration or catastrophe. He learned from the night shift cleaning supervisor, Maria, that the presentation had gone well. The board had approved final design submission. Papers would be signed in the morning. Groundbreaking was scheduled for April. Marcus had approximately 14 hours before the Ridley Creek Bridge design became an official, legally submitted, state-approved document. After that, challenging it would require formal engineering review, regulatory intervention, and the kind of institutional process that took months while construction began anyway. At 2:15 a.m., he made a decision that he knew might cost him everything he had left. He called the firm's CEO, not Victor Linden, the other founder. Claire Hargrove, whose name came first on the building but whose presence had become quieter in recent years as Victor had gradually taken control of all technical operations. Marcus found her direct office line on the internal directory taped inside the security desk drawer. He expected voicemail. He was prepared to leave a message that would sound insane coming from a night guard and would probably be deleted before she finished listening. Claire Hargrove answered on the third ring. "Who is this?" Her voice was alert, not sleepy, the voice of someone who had also not been resting easily. "Ma'am, my name is Marcus Ward. I work night security in your building." A pause. "It's 2 in the morning. "Yes, ma'am. I know what time it is. I also know your board approved the Ridley Creek Bridge design today, and I believe there's a specification error in the pylon reinforcement schedule that could result in structural failure under sustained wind loading." The silence that followed lasted long enough for Marcus to hear his own pulse in his ears. "Say that again," Claire said. He said it again slower this time, adding the rebar grade discrepancy, the geological wind corridor data, the Kessler and Pratt underbid percentage, and the handwritten note referencing Kessler guidance on a discarded worksheet. Claire Hargrove did not hang up. She did not laugh. She asked one question. How does a security guard know what rebar grade a bridge pylon needs? Marcus hesitated. "That's a longer answer. I'll be at the office in 40 minutes. Don't leave." She arrived at 3:05 a.m. in a dark coat over what looked like pajama pants, carrying a leather bag and the expression of a woman who had been expecting bad news without knowing what shape it would take. She was 61 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of authority that didn't need volume. Her father had started the firm. She'd grown it. Victor Linden had married into partnership 22 years ago when the company needed his technical reputation to win federal contracts. Marcus met her in the lobby. She looked at his uniform, his badge, his face, measuring him the way engineers measure materials, looking for where the weakness might be hidden. "Show me," she said. He showed her the photos on his phone, the discarded worksheets, the load calculations he had run himself on a free engineering software trial version, using the geological survey data and publicly available wind speed records. Claire studied the numbers on his phone screen for nearly 3 minutes without speaking, then, "These calculations are correct." "Yes, ma'am. Grade 60 in that valley is negligent." "Yes, ma'am. Who taught you to run load analysis?" "Virginia Tech. 5.5 years ago." She studied him again differently this time. "What happened?" Marcus answered the way he always did when someone asked about the gap between who he had been and who he was now, carefully, without self-pity, and briefly. "My wife got sick, then she died. I had a 2-year-old. Some things don't wait while you figure out the rest." Claire set the phone down on the security desk. "Come upstairs with me." They spent the next 2 hours in the 7th floor conference room with the locked cabinet open and the full blueprint set spread across the table. Claire had the access codes. She also had 35 years of engineering judgment, and the deeper she read, the quieter she became, which Marcus understood was worse than anger. The specification change wasn't limited to the pylons. Foundation anchor bolts had been downgraded. Concrete mix design showed lower cement ratios than the original proposal. Bearing pad materials had been substituted, every change pointed the same direction, cheaper, and every change had been approved with Victor's signature. At 5:20 a.m., Claire called the firm's lead project analyst, a young engineer named Sarah Okafor, and told her to come in immediately. Sarah arrived at 5:55, confused and alarmed, carrying a laptop bag and a protein bar she hadn't finished eating. When she saw the marked-up blueprints and the man in the security uniform standing beside Claire Hargrove at the conference table, her confusion deepened. Run the original spec against the revised spec, Claire said. Full dynamic load model. Ridley Creek wind corridor parameters. Sarah opened her laptop without asking why, because Claire Hargrove did not make requests at 6:00 a.m. for casual reasons. 20 minutes later, Sarah stopped typing. Her face changed the way faces change when numbers tell you something you don't want to know. The revised specs pass static load requirements, she said carefully, but under sustained dynamic wind loading above 74 miles per hour with full traffic density. She paused, safety factor drops to 887. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Anything below 1.0 meant the structure could fail. Not might. Could. How often does Ridley Creek Valley exceed 74 miles per hour? Claire asked, though she already knew. Sarah checked the geological survey. Average of 6 storm events per year. Marcus watched Claire's hands flatten against the table as the full weight of what Victor had done settled into the room, a bridge designed to quietly fail. Not today, not next year. But eventually, inevitably, during some storm that would feel ordinary until the moment it wasn't. Where is Victor now? Claire asked. He left last night around 9:09, Marcus said. His car isn't in the garage. Claire picked up her phone and dialed Victor's number. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. She hung up without leaving a message. How much is Kessler and Pratt saving on the material downgrade? She asked Sarah. Sarah ran the numbers. Approximately $18.6 million across all structural components. Claire looked at Marcus. And Victor's relationship with Dale Kessler? Marcus showed her the photo from Victor's office. The golf tournament, the handshake, the brass nameplate. That's not proof, Claire said. That's a photograph at a charity event. Check the vendor selection file, Marcus said quietly. See who recommended Kessler and Pratt over the other 2 bidders. Sarah pulled the procurement records from the shared server. The recommendation memo bore one signature. Victor Linden. Claire straightened. Her voice shifted into something colder, more precise, the voice of a woman who had just discovered that the person she trusted most had been building failure into her family's legacy. Lock everything, she said. Every file, every revision, every email. Nothing gets deleted. At 7:15, the first employees began arriving. They noticed Claire's car in the lot hours before her usual time. They noticed the conference room lights burning. They noticed the security guard sitting at the executive table beside the CEO, which was the kind of thing that generated whispered theories in the elevator before anyone had even poured coffee. At 7:40, Victor Linden walked through the front entrance carrying a briefcase and a dry, cleaned suit jacket draped over one arm. He smiled at the receptionist, took the main elevator to the 7th floor, and stopped when he saw Claire standing in the corridor outside the conference room. Early morning, he said, smile still in place. Come inside, Victor. He walked in and immediately saw the blueprints laid open, the laptop displaying Sarah's load analysis, and Marcus Ward sitting near the window in his security uniform, watching without expression. Victor's smile did not disappear. It recalculated. What's happening here? Claire answered without sitting. The Ridley Creek pylon specs were changed from grade 75 to grade 60 rebar. Foundation anchors were downgraded, concrete ratios were reduced. All under your signature, all benefiting a subcontractor you personally recommended and personally know. Victor looked at Marcus first, not Claire. That sequence told everyone in the room exactly how he had prioritized the threat. You let a security guard access proprietary engineering documents? Answers the question, Victor. These are standard value engineering adjustments. Every major project undergoes cost optimization before final submission. You know that cost optimization doesn't drop safety factor below 1.0. Victor's expression flickered. He turned to Sarah. Who ran that model? I did, Sarah said, 20 minutes ago. Using what parameters? The ones in the geological survey your team cited in the original proposal. Victor shifted strategies. Dynamic models are theoretical. Real-world performance includes... Stop, Claire said. The word landed like a door closing. I've been building bridges for 35 years. Don't lecture me on dynamic loading. Victor looked around the room, recalculating again. His eyes returned to Marcus. I want to understand something. How does a night guard identify a rebar specification discrepancy from a blueprint he had no authorization to view? Claire answered before Marcus could. That's not the question you should be worried about right now. It's the question I'm asking. Marcus met his gaze steadily. He had spent 2 years being invisible in this building, walking past men like Victor who never looked down long enough to see who was keeping their floors safe at 3 a.m. Being seen now felt strange, like stepping into sunlight after a long time underground. The number was wrong, Marcus said simply. I could see it was wrong, Victor scoffed. You could see it. A man who checks door locks for a living could see what an entire engineering team approved. Your engineering team approved what you told them to approve. The room went quiet. Sarah looked down at her keyboard. Claire watched Victor's face, searching for the crack she knew was coming. Victor turned back to Claire, voice lower now. You're going to destroy this company over one security guard's amateur opinion? I'm going to save this company from building a bridge that kills people. If you pull the submission, we lose the contract. $240 million. The firm doesn't survive that. The firm doesn't survive a bridge collapse, either. Victor stepped closer, voice dropping further. Claire, think about what you're doing. Think about employees, pensions, families who depend on this contract. Claire's jaw tightened because that argument found its mark. Marcus could see it land, the flicker of doubt, the weight of 400 jobs pressing against the weight of public safety. That was the cruelest part of what Victor had built. He had made the lie load-bearing so that removing it threatened to bring everything else down. Then Sarah spoke from behind her laptop, voice thin but steady. There's something else. Everyone turned. The revision history shows the specification changes were made in 3 separate sessions over 2 weeks. Each session was followed within 48 hours by a payment to Kessler and Pratt flagged as advanced material procurement. 3 payments, $2.1 million total, before any material was delivered. Victor's composure cracked. Not dramatically, just enough. A tightening around the eyes, a slight shift in weight, the body responding faster than the mind could mask. Claire stared at him. Advanced procurement payments require my co-signature. Sarah hesitated. They have your signature, ma'am. Digital. Claire's face went still. I never signed those. Marcus watched the understanding move across Claire's expression. Not just specification fraud. Forged authorization. Victor had used her digital signature without consent, routing payments to a company he had a personal relationship with, for materials he knew were substandard, for a bridge he knew would eventually fail. Claire reached for the desk phone and dialed the firm's legal counsel. Then she looked at Victor one last time. You risked people's lives. Victor answered with the quiet precision of a man who had rehearsed justification so many times he had begun to believe it. I saved this company. You were too cautious to see what the market demanded. Every firm cuts margins. I just did it more efficiently. You forged my signature. I accelerated approvals you would have delayed until we lost the bid. People would have died, Victor. For the first time, something shifted in his face. Not guilt, exactly. Something closer to the recognition that the math of consequences had finally caught up with the math of profit. Maybe, he said. Maybe not. Bridges are over-engineered by default. The margins I removed were academic. Point 87 isn't academic. It's a funeral. Legal counsel arrived at 8:30. By 9:15, Victor Linden had been escorted from the building by 2 security officers Marcus had called himself, which carried an irony that no one in the room failed to notice. By 10, the State Transportation Department had been notified of a design review delay. By 11, Claire Hargrove had personally called the governor's infrastructure office to report suspected procurement fraud. The contract wasn't dead. The bridge wasn't canceled. But everything stopped long enough for truth to be examined under proper light, which was all Marcus had hoped for when he picked up the phone at 2:15 that morning. At noon, Claire found Marcus standing near the lobby security desk, packing his thermos into his bag. His shift had ended 6 hours ago. He had not slept in 28 hours. His eyes were heavy and his mind kept drifting to the fact that Caleb's school lunch account was overdue by 14.50 cents, and he had forgotten to pack a snack for the after-school program. Sit down, Claire said. Marcus sat in the lobby chair, the one usually reserved for delivery drivers waiting for sign-in badges. Claire sat across from him, which surprised the receptionist enough that she pretended to reorganize paperwork so she could watch without staring. Virginia Tech, Claire said. Master's program. Structural engineering. Yes, ma'am? Your advisor, Dr. Raymond Chow. Claire almost smiled. Ray Chow taught me soil mechanics in 1987. Marcus blinked. For a brief, strange moment, the distance between who he was and who she was collapsed into a single classroom neither of them had shared but both remembered. Why didn't you finish? Claire asked. Marcus gave the answer he had given before, but this time it came out slightly different because he was exhausted enough to stop editing himself. Because my wife was dying and my son was too young to understand why his mother kept going to the hospital and not coming back. And after she was gone, I couldn't figure out how to be a student and a father at the same time, so I picked the one that mattered more. Claire studied him. And you took security work. It let me be home before he wakes up. That's the whole reason. She nodded slowly. Then she opened a folder she had been carrying and placed it on the lobby table between them. I need someone who looks at numbers the way you do. Independent of Victor's team. Independent of anyone who spent years learning not to question what they were told. Marcus looked at the folder without opening it. I don't have a degree. You have 28 months of graduate training, a 3.94 GPA, and you just identified a design fraud that my entire senior engineering staff missed or ignored for 6 months. The degree is a formality at this point. Marcus almost opened the folder, then stopped. What are the hours? What do they need to be? I pick up my son at 3:15 every day. Some weeks he has doctor visits. When he's sick, I stay home. Then you pick him up at 3:15. When he's sick, you stay home. Marcus looked at her carefully, the way he looked at numbers, searching for where the flaw might be hidden. He didn't find one. One more thing, he said. Claire waited. Your night shift staff, security, cleaning, maintenance, most of them are doing what I did. Working hours nobody wants because the schedule fits around kids or second jobs or situations they didn't choose. Maria in housekeeping takes the bus 90 minutes each way because she can't afford to live near this office. Terrence downstairs has been requesting a shift change for 8 months so he can attend his daughter's physical therapy appointments. Nobody answers those requests because nobody reads them. Claire said nothing for a moment. Then, what are you asking? Read them. Claire looked at him the way people look at things they had stopped expecting to find. Then she nodded once. Done. Marcus opened the folder. Inside was a title he had never imagined seeing next to his name, Senior Design Review Analyst. He read it twice, then closed the folder and put it in his bag next to his thermos. I need to go pick up my son, then go pick up your son. Marcus walked out through the lobby at 12:25 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, carrying a bag that held a dented thermos, an employment offer, and the quiet knowledge that the right number, spoken at the right time by someone no one expected to speak, had kept a bridge from breaking and a company from building its own disaster. Caleb was waiting outside the after-school room when Marcus arrived 8 minutes early for the first time in months. His backpack was crooked. He had a grass stain on one knee. He was holding a piece of construction paper with a drawing of a bridge on it, arched and bright with stick figures standing on top. We learned about bridges today, Caleb said. Did you know they have to be really strong underneath even though you can't see it? Marcus knelt down slowly, adjusted the backpack strap, and looked at the drawing for a long time. Yeah, he said. I know. They walked to the car together, Caleb talking about compression and tension with the cheerful imprecision of a 7-year-old who had just discovered that the world was held together by invisible math. Marcus listened to every word, carrying the drawing carefully in one hand so the crayon wouldn't smudge. Behind them, 7 floors above the city, Claire Hargrove stood at the conference room window watching the parking lot, though she could no longer see them. On the table behind her, the corrected blueprints waited for signatures that would take weeks to arrive. The contract would survive, the bridge would be built. This time, the numbers underneath would hold. And somewhere between the school and the apartment above the dry cleaner, a boy who drew bridges and a father who understood what kept them standing drove home through ordinary afternoon light. Neither of them yet knowing how much had changed, except that today, for once, Marcus Ward was early.